Oh, hi. You caught me stocking up on Star Wars soup. Speaking of terrible Star Wars ideas, how about the time Han Solo couldn't get his money out of the bank? Bitty bitty.
Comic Tropes. Comic Tropes.
Hello! Welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. It was the spring of 1983. Return of the Jedi had just come out and wrapped up the Star Wars movie trilogy. But the Marvel Comics had no plans to stop. Issue 81 was going to be the first issue set after Return of the Jedi. So what would it be about? Would it be about the emotional impact on all these main characters? Would it be our heroes facing a brand new, bigger threat? Would it be about the challenges of a government rebuilding and settling post-war aftermath? Or would it be about Han Solo begging for money? The story kicks off with Han Solo looking right at us, telling us, "It's me!" So if you've decided issue 81 is a good place to start reading Star Wars, you get a sitcom-level introduction to the protagonist of this story. Also, the title of the story is Jawas of Doom. So we could have had a title that was intriguing or poetic, but instead they settled for a bad pun. I'd say that I expect more out of writer Joe Duffy, but a lot of you are probably saying, who? To be fair, Joe Duffy had a long career. She worked for over 3 decades at Marvel, DC, Image as a writer and an editor. She wrote on Power Man and Iron Fist for 2 years. She was the editor that oversaw the adaptation of Akira for US audiences. So she's accomplished a lot of great things. This issue isn't one of them. On page 2, we see that Han Solo is asking for a loan from this guy. Not Lando or Luke, just some random pilot. A pilot that says, "I've never much liked pirates or smugglers or Corellians or people that don't pay their debts." Just for the record, Han Solo's race is Corellian. So when this pilot says he doesn't like Corellians, he's being a straight up space racist. So this bears some breaking down. The plot of the story is that Han Solo needs money. Why does he need money? The story never gets into that. It's not addressed at all. It's just Han Solo wants money. If this issue had its own Star Wars opening crawl, it'd look something like this. And this all takes place immediately after the movie ends. It's the very next morning. After the first random pilot storms off, we see the thoughts of another random pilot amazed at seeing Chewbacca take a nap with some Ewoks. Leia runs up and learns that Han's first concern after defeating the Empire is to get some money. She offers to loan him some since she's a wealthy princess, or says the rebellion could forward him some money, and Han angrily refuses. Han Solo is a general in the Rebel Alliance, but for some reason he won't accept money for doing that job. And when his girlfriend offers to loan him some, he won't accept that, but he would accept a loan from some random pilot that we've never seen before. Han is acting crazy in this issue, so I guess it's up to us to make sense of that and just say that, hey, he was frozen in carbonite for years and it made him go cuckoo. Han then spends a page and a half thinking about how he doesn't belong to anyone or anything except maybe his spaceship, and he wanders around the Millennium Falcon and fondles his lucky dice. Then Chewbacca gives him a hug. It's sweet, but in the next panel, Han has recruited Leia and R2-D2 to go with him on the exciting adventure of withdrawing some money he just remembered he left in a bank on Tatooine. The fantastic world of Star Wars, where spaceships have light speed, but they haven't figured out internet banking. Oh, sorry there, Chewie, I gotta run to the bank. I'll see you in a couple weeks. We then cut to the desert planet Tatooine, specifically the Sarlacc pit where Han Solo and his friends defeated Jabba the Hutt and Boba Fett in Return of the Jedi. And following up on that, we see the Sarlacc literally burp up a body that remembers those events. Now, this illustration of the Sarlacc pit shows how it looked in the original theatrical release, But since then, the special editions have come along, so this is really how the comic book should look. Some Jawas are salvaging the wreckage by the Sarlacc pit and come across Boba Fett, who's been spit out by the Sarlacc and is unconscious. Somehow, both the Jawas and their droid can't tell that Boba Fett is a bounty hunter and assume he's a droid or a cyborg and pack him into their massive sandcrawler. I know what you're probably thinking. Hey, with Darth Vader and the Empire gone, bringing Boba Fett back is a fantastic idea. Well, let's put a pin in that and come back to it later, because I want to first address the Jawas in this situation. Now, I can believe that the Jawas are stupid enough that they can't tell a living being from a machine. I can buy into that storyline-wise. But why do they have a droid programmed to talk to them in English? Excuse me, nerds, basic, when they speak an alien language? This would be the equivalent of setting your TV menus in French. Han parks his ship at Mos Eisley and heads to the bank. Leia waits outside and is apparently mistaken for a prostitute as she tells an alien, No, I'm not, working." The alien then reveals that he's from the planet Exposition and tells Leia that the Jawas have become as dangerous as sand people and that she knows how bad they are. In my favorite part of this story, Leia just goes, no, I really don't. Han speaks with a super rude old lady at the bank that refuses to help him because her records indicate he was frozen, so his account was frozen too. It's pretty bad customer service, but then again, what would you expect from the barmaid that kicked everyone out of the bar in the Star Wars Holiday Special, played by B. Arthur? Han storms out and grabs a drink with Leia, explaining that instead of speaking with a bank manager, he'd have to talk to a computer, and he doesn't know how to do that. Leia points out that R2-D2 could do that. It's kind of why they brought him along. But when they go to retrieve him from the docking bay, R2-D2 is missing. A nearby mechanic working on land speeders says some Jawas were just there, so Han and Leia ruin the poor guy's day by stealing his vehicles and heading out into the desert to find R2. Inside the sandcrawler, R2-D2 recognizes Boba Fett, but Boba Fett conveniently has amnesia. Meanwhile, Han and Leia shoot at the sandcrawler in an attempt to get it to stop to see if they have R2-D2. When the vehicle doesn't stop, Han makes like Indiana Jones and jumps onto the moving vehicle. At the same time, some sand people up in the hills also begin shooting at the sandcrawler. They also knock Leia out of her land speeder. Han jumps through a hatch on top of the sandcrawler and sees R2 and Boba Fett. He proposes they help each other escape from the apparently out-of-control vehicle, only to realize Fett doesn't recognize him. This makes Han think, hallelujah. Yeah, Han thinks, hallelujah. He doesn't think, oh, thanks Space Buddha, or, oh, the Force was with me on that one. He thinks of a term from the Hebrew Bible. And now that I think of it, back in Empire Strikes Back, he told a fellow officer on Hoth that he would see him in hell. The implications of this are staggering. Han doesn't believe in the Force in the first movie, but he's using all these other terms from different religions. I hope the upcoming movie spends a good 45 minutes sorting out Han Solo's religious beliefs. Boba Fett kindly helps Han lift R2-D2 out of the sandcrawler's hatch because they didn't introduce that the droid could fly for 19 more years. Then Leia shouts Han's name, and Boba Fett may be amnesiac, but he can still hear a name from hundreds of yards away over the sound of blaster fire and sandcrawler engines. This jogs his memory, and he remembers that he hates Han Solo. Han dodges some blaster fire because he's incredible at that, and jumps off the sandcrawler, which plummets right back into the Sarlacc pit with Boba Fett still inside. Han and Leia say they will now walk back to Mos Eisley. I guess those sand people that were just shooting at them are just not a threat anymore. I have to admit, I read this issue as a kid, and it was so anticlimactic. Boba Fett was brought back only to be put in the exact same place he was before this particular issue started. It was so disappointing. I can also admit that as a kid, I didn't really follow the banking subplot that well, but now as an adult, I look at it and I'm like, oh my god, this is so boring. I mean, Han Solo pretends he needs money in this issue, but it's never brought up again. He just keeps working with the Rebel Alliance for another 2 years worth of stories, and it's not like he ever goes shopping for a brand new outfit. I would say that the highlight of this issue is the early Ron Frenz artwork. Ron Frenz was never a huge superstar, but he did have a good run on Amazing Spider-Man in the 80s, and then drew Thor for quite a while, which included introducing Thunderstrike. I would call him a solid draftsman that always produces pages that are clean and clear. And I honestly think he does some pretty good likenesses. I think that Han and Leia look accurate in this comic, and even though he's only in a few panels, Chewbacca actually looks good. Now, this was a time before internet reference was a handy thing, so sometimes getting a character like Chewbacca right was actually quite difficult. Some great artists worked on this book and still couldn't get Chewbacca right, from early issues with art by Howard Chaykin to the final issues by Cynthia Martin. The Star Wars comics that Marvel put out in the 70s and 80s were hit and miss. The weakest stuff was new characters that don't feel like they belong in Star Wars, like Jackson, the Green Rabbit. But the strongest was the artwork of some really talented folks. In particular, the art by Al Williamson adapting Empire Strikes Back from issues 39 to 44. So that will do it for this issue. The Star Wars comics were hit and miss, but I'll tell you something. As a kid in 1983, you took what you could get. There wasn't a lot of Star Wars stories out there to read. I have to admit that I had fun with it as a kid. I look at it now and it doesn't quite feel right, but you know, Star Wars took a long time to sort of find its way when it was creating that expanded universe of books and games, toys, all that other stuff. There just wasn't a lot of extra Star Wars stuff beyond the movies in 1983. We didn't even have, you know, the Droids and Ewoks cartoons or the Ewoks TV movies. So there wasn't much to go around, and we settled for what we could. Listen, folks, I appreciate you watching. Every week I love to give away a Gachapon prize that I got in Japan. This week I had a Death Star Gachapon that you split apart, and inside is a model kit for something like an X-Wing or the Millennium Falcon, who knows. I wanted to give this away. I didn't get any fan art this week. That's totally fine. That just means, you know, some other week people will get this. But if you'd like to send in some fan art, send it to comictropes@gmail.com, and I will show your art here. I will credit you. I am happy to share either your social address, or maybe you've got a website portfolio. Happy to share any of that if you would care to send in some fan art. All right, I had a lot of fun doing this one. Looking forward to the next Star Wars movie. I hope it's okay. You know, is it going to be great? Probably not, but it might be fun. I'm hopeful, fingers crossed. Until next week, keep reading comics.